Llewellyn King, the host of MECFS Alert, which I produce with my co-host, Deborah Woroff. Today we're at the Mailman School of Public Health at Columbia University. And I am joined, and I'm very glad that she's here, by Mady Hornig. And you are, tell us.
I'm Director of Translational Research at the Center for Infection and Immunity at the Mailman School of Public Health, and also Associate Professor of Epidemiology.
And how did you come to have an interest in ME?
Now, I've been interested in this area for well over 20 years, and I became interested because I was fascinated by the possibility that the immune system and derangements or disturbances of the immune system might actually alter brain function and behaviors that are associated with the brain. And so I was very interested in this subset of what I think of as immune-mediated brain disorders. And I think of MECFS as one of these disorders.
What progress are we making?
Well, this week we've had some really exciting news, which is that we have found some differences in the immune system that are apparent in early phase MECFS, so 3 years or less after the onset of the disorder. And the immune system findings there are very different than those that we see for individuals with MECFS of long standing, so well over 3 years or even up to 10 years or more.
How does this help with diagnosis, or does it?
Well, we hope it will help with diagnosis. We're not there yet, but it's very suggestive that there may be a possibility that we could use a blood test to help distinguish between people who have MECFS and those who have fatigue that may be related to other disorders, like certain cancers or heart disease or such.
In that blood test, would it matter whether that was in a 3-year period or in a lifelong period?
Yes, it would, but we think that we can potentially make an inroad for diagnosis both early and late. Obviously, we're very excited and keen to try to diagnose this disorder as early as possible. But what we found was that there were differences from healthy controls, both early in disease and late in disease. But those two groups were very different from one another. So early on, you saw most prominently increases in these immune molecules, these proteins that are part of the immune system called cytokines. But late in disease, we often found that there were decreased levels, almost like a premature aging of the immune system in people with long-standing MECFS.
Does any of this research lead to the possibility of something to counter these effects?
Oh, we hope so. We hope so.
And what in your mind, what in your dreams would that be?
Well, we have, just loosely speaking, one would think that early on, when these cytokines, these immune molecules are elevated, one would be looking for an immunosuppressant. And then later in disease, when over 3 years, when these cytokines are kind of petering out, almost exhausting themselves, perhaps something that would selectively boost those components of the immune system may be preferentially helpful in later phases of disease. What we also think is that there are things that are perhaps already on the market that we might be able to use. I can give you an example.
Yes, please.
So one example is we found early in disease, we found increase in a cytokine known as interleukin 17A. And there are at least 3 different commercially available antibodies, monoclonal antibodies, that target that cytokine and reduce its effect. And they're being used already for disorders like psoriatic arthritis, for example. Already approved, so general safety is known. What we need to learn is whether it would be beneficial to give such a IL-17A suppressing agent to somebody early during disease. Would it help them? Would it be safe for that patient population? And would it be beneficial to counteract their symptoms?
The other enormous reality about this disease, apart from the very hard to diagnose, impossible more or less to cure, is that we don't have the doctors who know about it. And if you come up with a wonderful way of diagnosing it, how are you going to persuade the medical profession what it is? I've talked to many doctors who know nothing about the disease, and that's right, they know nothing about the disease.
That's right.
Absolutely nothing.
Right.
One of them asked me, because they've got a patient who they thought had MECFS, asked me what should be done.
Well, I hope you get a consultant fee.
I would
It's
immediately hope they find somebody who might know something, not a journalist.
It's very sad. It's very sad, and we must do some more to address this. I think until we give the doctors tools not only to diagnose, but some ideas as to how to manage a patient with this disorder.
How can we make it exciting to doctors? At the beginning of AIDS, nobody wanted to know about it. And then as celebrities got involved, as it lost its stigma, and suddenly a lot of people, a lot of medical professionals wanted to be working on it, and that continues to this day.
Yes.
How are we going to do this for MECFS?
I think it's going to take more than just the diagnosis, but that's a start. I think we must have some treatment regimens that we can tailor to those individuals who show these differences in the immune system, the most prominent immune signatures. If we're able to address that, even if it's not a cure, even if it can be used as a biomarker that identifies people who would respond to a certain type of antibody or immunosuppressive treatment, for example, or in later phases of disease, an immune boosting treatment. That, I think, is going to be the game changer.
Where should the research effort go now, the research dollars and the best minds?
Well, I think that it's critical to know what's causing this disease as well. We, as well as others, are continuing through the Microbe Discovery Project and a chronic fatigue initiative funded study of the gut microbiome. We're trying to find the infectious triggers and the microbial triggers that may be setting this process off. We think that knowing more about what causes the disease goes hand in hand with being able to best diagnose it as early as possible and to best treat it.
Psychiatry is among your qualifications. Normally the mention of psychiatry in this disease causes people very considerable anguish because of this contention by some in the medical profession that it's a psychiatric rather than a somatic problem.
Absolutely. But every time you have a thought or have an emotion, it's a biochemical process. It's a biological process. And we know that there are many disorders that affect the brain that have an immune mechanism that are leading to this type of disorder. And it is not only MECFS, many other disorders that have this type of component. We think inflammation may have something to do with Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease, at least in a subset.
As a layman, one of the questions I'm most often asked is, what about contagion? What about contagion within families where it seems to be relatively common, but not outside of the family? And then we have the phenomenon of the big outbreaks, as in Klein Village, Royal Free Hospital, etc.
Right.
And Lindenhurst, New York.
Absolutely. Well, we're keen to see whether we can find an agent. That's another reason why, if we can come early in the process of disease and make a very early diagnosis, we think that it's much more likely that we would find the offending agent and perhaps harbored inside the white blood cells in the blood or in other tissues. We think the earlier we go, the more likely it is we could find the agent that sets this off. Contagion is a possibility. But obviously also within families, we know that they also share some genetic risks, and so we know that everybody who gets mono, glandular fever, right, which is due to the Epstein-Barr virus, we know that those individuals are not all susceptible to getting a chronic fatigue-like syndrome after the initial infection. Only a percentage do. What's different about their genetic risk? How can we understand that so that we can predict and perhaps avert the long-term consequences in those who are vulnerable.
Have you learned anything that suggests that this disease, this pathogen, cannot or is possibly triggered by environmental circumstances?
It's very possible. We haven't learned anything, as yet that would add something new to this situation. But we do think that it is likely that there's an intersection, and it could even be toxins that are breathed in, or that come in through the diet and other sources that can disrupt the immune system and increase the risk for an untoward consequence after infection.
I want to go back to the next steps. Where should the effort be directed now, and where, therefore, should the money go?
Well, I think that the money must go to immune hypotheses that are really presenting us with such exciting opportunities now. These exciting findings. We really did not anticipate seeing such marked elevations in so many different cytokines. We're very, very excited about that. And what was different about this study that we just did was that we pulled a thread that allowed these results to come through. When we looked at all of the MECFS together, the results were not so dramatic. But when you pulled the duration of illness thread and compared short duration versus long duration and compared them with the healthy controls, that's where you saw something really marked. And so we're very excited about that. We know that we have tools in the medical armamentarium that we can, take off the shelf even, that may be able to begin to make some inroads into these devastating symptoms.
Dr. Hornig, it's a rare pleasure to talk to you.
Real
You're
pleasure.
Extraordinarily articulate.
Thank you.
Cheers.
It's really a pleasure.
That is our program. The next program will feature another interview with Dr. Mady Hornig, conducted by my co-host, Deborah.